2013 had every opportunity to be a bad year for video games. The PS3 and 360 were winding down as developers ramped up for the PS4 and Xbox One. The state of affairs on the Wii U was similarly dire, with multi-month delays on first-party games and some third parties pulling out entirely. It's easy to read those tea leaves and to see them portend doom. It felt like there were fewer games to play this year on the whole, but the number of really good games you could list off the top of your head was still really damn long. So it must be a hard year for me to pick a game of the year, right? Haha, nope, it's Gran Turismo 6. Peace out! Okay, yeah, that's a cop-out. Of course it's Gran Turismo 6. This is my list we're talking about. Could it ever be anything else? Well, honestly, maybe. See, it all depends on what you think a Game of the Year list should be. Are these the most fun games of 2013? Does length matter? Value for money? Whether they require you to have friends who want to play with you? How about a challenge or replayability? What if you don't like sports? Does that mean that none of the sports games were good? Well, that's the thing. They're not the best Game of the Year list, they're Game of the Year lists. Like Song of the Summer. It's not the best written or timeless classic. It's the one that will forever put you in the zeitgeist of that year. These lists are extremely subjective, and when we try to explain them, we turn into Richard Dreyfuss.
I can't describe it. What I'm feeling. What I'm thinking. This means something.
So here's my list. I'm sure you'll disagree, and that's cool, but before you try to argue with me, just keep in mind that you're arguing with a madman who builds sculptures out of mashed potatoes. Number 10, Remember Me. The most dubious entry on my list for sure. Remember Me takes a great premise, memory splicing, a great setting, future Paris, and a great gameplay mechanic, parkour combined with stealth, and then flushes it all down the toilet. In the end, you get a mediocre brawler and a pretty good story. If I'm honest, the game mostly gets a mention because I hope it encourages somebody to pick up the futuristic, non-apocalyptic sci-fi torch, or at the very least, put that freaking amazing soundtrack on something better. Number 9, Beyond: Two Souls. I'm maybe half or 3/4 of the way through this game and I still don't know what to make of it. I love what David Cage is trying to do. I love that there's somebody for whom cinematic means something more than Michael Bay Explosion Fest. The biggest problems with the game for me have been pacing problems. You spend a lot of time doing stuff between the important stuff. When it moves, it's a lot like Asura's Wrath, but serious. When it drags, it nearly dies. Number 8, Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider is probably the most conservative game I played this year, and that's a year with Mario, Zelda, and Gran Turismo. There's practically nothing new in this game. It's a straightforward, third-person action game with traversal sections and minor puzzles. It's also a game with really good fundamentals. The story works, the characters work, the mechanics work, the setting works, and while none of it breaks down barriers, and it's all done incredibly well. Good fundamentals win championships, never underestimate them. Number 7, BioShock Infinite. As much as genre bias works in favor of Gran Turismo, it's working against BioShock Infinite for me. First-person shooters just aren't my thing, especially ones with gamepads. The clunky mechanics and conventions aside, Irrational deserves a ton of credit for tackling plot concepts like alternate realities and time travel. I don't want to spoil anything about the ending or even the second half of the game, but there are a lot of ways to turn a plot like this into spaghetti, and they managed to present something that actually kinda makes sense. Number 6, Saints Row 4. Saints Row 4 is basically what you'd expect, a video game-ass video game. It knows precisely how ridiculous it is, and it makes a giant joke out of everything. It's one of the few video games that can lampoon another video game without being stupid or condescending. The silliness comes across as fun, and the fact that the characters are having fun rubs off on you. The superpowers go way beyond combat and fix a lot of the annoying traversal problems you get in open-world games. The only moments that still fell flat for me were the ones that reference Saints Row 1 or Saints Row 2. Those moments pass, and then you get back to blowing things up with a gun that shoots dubstep. Number 5, Gone Home. There's going to be a certain amount of people who see this list and say, but that's barely a game, or it's only 2 hours long, or any number of other excuses. But here's the thing. It was a singularly worthwhile experience, and that's what mattered to me. Gone Home tells a beautiful story, and it tells it well. That you don't have to shoot anybody along the way, or that there aren't 20-minute unskippable cinematics shouldn't deter you from enjoying something like this. Number 4, the Stanley Parable. The Stanley Parable is, well, a parable. A story of sorts, intended to teach a lesson. The real questions of the game, though, are, what's that lesson, and who's meant to learn it? Some dialogue seems aimed at players, some at game designers. Sometimes it seems to endorse gaming and storytelling as a medium. Sometimes it denounces gaming as a horrible waste of a life. All I can say for certain is that Stanley Parable will get you thinking about the nature of choice and the nature of narrative in gaming. Number 3, Super Mario 3D World, and number 2, The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Super Mario 3D World and The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds appear to mark a turning point for Nintendo. It looks as though this is the year that they finally figured out how to make a game that pulls in retro elements without wallowing in the past. What they ended up with are 2 great games devoid of the typical HD era largesse to muddle the experience. The simple contrast between these 2 games and other large first-party games is that there's no point in the game that I finished and then I said, oh thank God that's over. Every part of both of these games is worth playing, and none of it feels like a chore. The number 3 spot goes to Mario, and the number 2 spot goes to Zelda. I can't justify that order. I just like Zelda a little bit more. Number 1, Gran Turismo 6. Okay, I'll admit a fair amount of genre bias here. They released a new entry in my favorite series, in my favorite genre, and that's that, right? Not really, honestly. This could have gone bad in any number of ways, but thankfully it seems Polyphony has learned the right lessons from GT5. Some of the largesse is trimmed. Demo mode is gone, menus are smaller, loading is fast, and there are menu shortcuts to get you around. The game actually gives you an idea of where to start, and the infamous license tests are shortened and meaningful. Now they're basically graduation tests to get to the next level. The racing is still great, and the improved tire simulation is extremely easy to notice. The first time you brake going into a corner, that is. But the racing was never Gran Turismo's problem. It was all the nonsense in between the racing. GT6 is a legitimate swan song for the PS3, and, in my opinion at least, legitimately the best game I played all year. So let's wrap up here by talking about the zeitgeist, or at least what this year was for me in gaming. Last year was, well, nearly impossible for me. With a newborn around the house and the massive monkey wrench that threw into mine and my wife's schedules, finding time to play video games was nearly impossible, hence the big emphasis on the Wii U's off-TV play. This year we have a slightly better handle on our schedules and I'm managing to find more regular time for gaming. Here's the thing though, it's really only about an hour or 2 at a clip. The time itself is still really limited and really valuable. So this year I really valued games that valued my time. Short games like Gone Home and the Stanley Parable shouldn't be shunned for lacking length. They should be praised for adding brevity. The games that ended up near the top of my list all have something in common. When I sit down in front of them with just half an hour of free time, I know that I will make some measurable and significant forward progress. The games at the bottom either dwell at length on unimportant stuff like Beyond Two Souls, or punish the player for failure by making them repeat sections like Tomb Raider or Remember Me. On top of that, I think I'm hitting a point in my life where kill all the things is no longer a compelling gameplay mechanic. Surely with all the power at our collective disposal and the sum total of human imagination, we can come up with a few games where the goal is to do other stuff. Games like Gone Home and the Stanley Parable, where the goal is to explore and to think, struck a major chord with me. The one current running through most of these games, though, is that they feature simpler stories. Gran Turismo 6 has none. The Stanley Parable has several stories, but no one story is about saving the world, and Gone Home is a story of a family dealing with family issues. Many of the ones that escalate to saving the world start off with simpler problems. BioShock Infinite, retrieve the girl and absolve your debts. Tomb Raider, escape the locals and get off the island. Beyond, the story of a girl struggling with ESP. Remember Me, a quest to regain the stolen memories and identity. I posit, and will happily argue, that none of these games needed to raise the stakes. The most important part of any of these stories was still related to the original premise. Saving the world was just this ancillary thing you did on the side. So what's the takeaway from 2013? The best games for me value your time, involve mechanics other than kill everything to progress, and tell smaller character-focused stories. So here's the 2014 and hoping that it holds for more of the same.